Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
So what can we learn from an outsider, someone who, say, visits this region, eats the food, soaks up the sun in the Carolinas, plays the golf courses, hikes on the trails, drives on the roads? If we could get unbiased, honest opinions about the Carolinas, this place we call home, what would they say? And what will we learn? Welcome and thank you for watching the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. I am Chris William, and as the season begins to gain momentum, this time we discuss tourism. We'll check in again with North and South Carolina tourism bosses Wit Tuttell and Duane Parrish.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Travel and Tourism, featuring Wit Tuttell, Executive Director of Visit North Carolina, and Duane Parrish, Director of the South Carolina Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism.
Well, happy spring, happy season. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. You're smiling. That's a good thing, right, about the season?
Sure. Yes. Looking forward to it.
You know, this is interesting. This wasn't part of the dialogue, but, you know, right before the cameras and the lights came on, I've discovered that you all, I know you know each other. You've been on the program together, and I know you've talked from time to time, but turns out you talk a lot.
We do. It makes sense for us to work together. You know, visitation isn't exclusive a lot of times to North Carolina or South Carolina. People travel, they want to see sights, and you know, they don't pay as much attention to county lines or even state lines sometimes.
You know, which is interesting. So if it's encouraging to hear that tourism and intelligence about tourism is shared across borders. So without, I guess, do you both feel competitive with each other, or do you feel more like, you know, brothers in arms? Or, I mean, how does that work in tourism between North and South Carolina?
Well, I think it's much like automobile dealers that locate themselves together in the motor mile. You know, it makes sense for us as one, particularly with the international market. You know, they're not sure whether Charleston's in North Carolina or South Carolina or Charlotte's in North or South Carolina. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. And so we market ourselves together. We go as the Carolinas, more or less, and particularly in Europe, England and the UK. England and Germany. Those are countries that are our largest feeder markets outside the continent. So it's important for us to pool our money together, pool our resources, and Charlotte has the international airport to get them in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we both benefit if more people travel. We all benefit. We want that. Now, once we get more people traveling, then we'll fight it out amongst ourselves. So it's a friendly competition.
So how are you all feeling about this season? Let's just ask the obvious question.
Oh, very good. I think we've had 3 years of record tourism in South Carolina, and I expect 2016 to be the same.
So what kind of year-over-year growth, Duane, would you expect in growth?
The last 3 years, we've averaged about 7% growth.
Okay.
I expect this year to be 6 or 7% growth over last year.
North Carolina share that for you?
Yeah, we've been up. You know, the gas prices being down, that helps more travelers come, but they spend less because they're not spending as much on gas. I think we'll be up. We just got our 2015 numbers in, and they were up, and 2016 started really well.
So I've got to ask you this question. You know, the debate in North Carolina around North Carolina House Bill 2, how does that spill over into, I mean, will folks put a stake in the ground and say, you know, I'm just not traveling to the Tar Heel State, I'm just not going to do it? Or is it something else that we don't think about?
Yeah, I don't think so. You know, particularly for repeat visitors, they know North Carolina, they know who we are, they've been here. I don't think it's going to have that type of impact on us. Now, sports events, meetings, that's a different issue. But the main thing we're fighting right now is a media storm. There's negative publicity that's coming out against us. That's a real headwind for us to try and market tourism. At this time, and that's the challenge for us right now.
As a tourism professional, Wit, could North Carolina say, we're going to sit out spending tourism until this thing blows over and we get better street cred? I mean, that's obviously.
Well, you have to be careful how you market. The way I relate it to the PR storm we have going on in the media is sort of like a headwind against us, and almost like a hurricane headwind right now, and you can't market during a hurricane. You wait until the wind dies down, and then you come back and you market that. And I think we'll get there. We're on the forefront of a national issue. This isn't just us. It's a national discussion, and when you have that, you're going to have disagreement. That's going to be natural. I think the main thing that gets lost in a lot of the media coverage is that everybody's just trying to help. They're trying to protect people. And so I think as soon as we find a solution, hopefully that works for everybody, a compromise, we'll be able to move right back in.
Duane, so it had the Confederate flag coming down from the State House grounds had a positive effect according to the majority in South Carolina. As you hear Wit talk about what is happening in North Carolina with North Carolina Senate House Bill 2, you've been through this. What was the end game as you went through it? What were some of the thoughts you thought about tourism, thinking, is this going to hit our summer season? This is going to hit our fall, spring? What goes through your mind when you hear
some of the fervor around the flag really was a little over 10 years ago when it first started. But things went into place, like our NCAA ban that kept any conference or national NCAA events from taking place in the state, of which there are many. That was probably the biggest thing that hurt us financially that we could track. We know we didn't get a lot of those events. We're now we're in the bidding, we're in the mix. We're getting ready to have an announcement of one in Greenville. And so I think those things have made a big difference in terms of getting some of that business back. You're right, we sort of we still marketed, obviously. It was very important to us, and we still did very well. But now, since the flag has come down, the NCAA has lifted its ban, the NAACP has lifted its ban. It's opened up the markets really for everyone to come to the state. And that's where Wit will get to, I think, in terms of from North Carolina's perspective. But I feel for him. I mean, I know what he's going through. Right. It's not easy, but there'll be light at the end of the tunnel.
And one final question on this, and I want to move on to the actual tourist. When you look at, in some of the visitors bureaus in the different towns, Asheville, Wilmington, Charlotte, and Charleston, when you see a drop in RFPs for meetings, for anything, is that a canary in the coal mine for what's to come, or is that something, we're concerned we're not getting as many requests, but it ended up being X? What was X, Duane?
If X for us was, there was some impact from it, and it was every year. It's the ones we didn't know about, the ones that impact us, that you never hear about because you were never in the mix. But when you're right, when you see the percentage of RSPs drop, compared to nationally, if you're less, that is a canary in the coal mine.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about what you learned from the tourist. I mean, not just about they're going to spend this amount of money on trinkets and gas and food, but Wit, I'm looking at you. What do you learn from the tourists about North Carolina, and not just about its beauty, but what is applicable? What can you take to the bank?
Yeah, it's interesting because tourism is one of those businesses you really have to do a lot of research, because we don't stop people when they come over to the state line and say, why did you come here? What are you coming here for? What are you doing? That doesn't happen. So we do it kind of through two ways, quantitative and qualitative. We do a lot of research, phone surveys, internet surveys, and then we'll do some focus groups occasionally as well. What we found out, and most recently we did some research, particularly in Atlanta and DC. We got some extra funding to do a targeted market campaign. And some of the things that fascinated us that we learned there is that so many of those people, and those are real core markets for us, but they see us as a getaway, not a vacation. So sometimes it's the words, very important. When they talked about North Carolina, they never said vacation. And we asked about vacation, and they said, no, getaway. It's a getaway, a quick getaway. And so part of our campaign is to try and inspire people to think of it more as a vacation, not so much a getaway, because a getaway you go for a day or two. You don't spend as much, you don't do as much. We want them to come on vacation, spend some time.
Is the return on investment to try to change the vernacular in their mind, does it show up in a longer term stay?
That's our hope, is to get them to think of it as we did a campaign called Vacation Big, because we wanted to show that this wasn't just a getaway. You're creating memories, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And we hope to see that improve, particularly in those two markets.
Well, and Duane, you talked about the undiscovered part of South Carolina before. Was that a similar effect here?
Very similar from both quantitative research as well as focus groups. We came to know that, okay, Myrtle Beach has a brand, Charleston has a brand. As a state agency, we could probably be more effective from a percentage standpoint with some of our other areas, the more rural areas, what we call undiscovered South Carolina. Basically came back with a campaign called There's Always Something New to Discover in South Carolina. One of the things we found with the millennials that they're really interested in unique experiences, authentic experiences, things that are different from what the norm. And so we really sort of targeted that market because, quite frankly, that's the growing market that over time will replace the baby boomers and who have now replacing the greatest generation. So from a traveling standpoint, how and why they travel is different today, and I think those millennials are looking for those things, and that's paddleboarding, kayaking, canoeing, hunting, fishing, hiking, all those kinds of things. That outdoor adventure-seeking person is a target market that we've gone after, particularly with our Undiscovered campaign.
Does some of the information you get from focus groups or conversations or stopping them on the highway and saying, why aren't you visiting, do these transfer into policy of some sort?
They transfer into marketing, the way we market, the appeal we have, the campaigns we use. So they definitely translate into active the way we're doing it. And travel is something, the way people travel, the way people plan travel, it's changing so quickly, and there's so much technology coming out that impacts that. That's one of the most important things I think we do, is not just to find out why they're coming, but how are they planning? How are they making those plans? Because we need to hit them when they're planning. Once they've planned it, it's too late.
Yeah. We talk about policy. Both South Carolina's in General Assembly session. North Carolina's in a short session. We've talked a little bit about HB2 and some of the social issues that have come up. But transportation is job one, it seems like, for both General Assemblies in North and South Carolina. In South Carolina, Duane, the hope is that there's going to be some transportation funding, meaningful transportation funding. How punitive is not having clear transportation policy and funding is to tourism and the growth of tourism?
I think on the surface, no pun intended, it's not a major impact. The impact is when someone comes in the state and has hits a pothole, has to have their front end repaired. You run the risk of them not coming back or going somewhere else, and you run the risk of them talking to their neighbors about it, the bad experience. I don't know that people are more focused on weather and where they're going than they are the condition of the roads. If it becomes too much of an issue, and we're getting close to that point in South Carolina, then certainly it can become an issue for tourism on the front end. Right now, it's sort of the back end. Did they have a bad experience? Did they hit a pothole? Did they run off the road? Rest area was closed. Whatever the case may be, that caused them to have a bad experience and may not come back. But on the front end, it's not too much of an issue.
What about the larger issue, like use Myrtle Beach and the Grand Strand? I mean, here's an area that gets more and more congested every season, every fall, every spring. When does that become a tipping point for Myrtle Beach? And it's the golden calf, and I still have some questions about why South Carolina doesn't put a priority on building an interstate or some type of access.
Sure. Well, Myrtle Beach is the largest destination in the country without an interstate to it. And that's an issue. We need it for, obviously roads are clogged, and they have created some local infrastructure to prep themselves for Interstate 73. And it's in the hopes, I think, that'll happen in the next few years, and it should. Quite frankly, it's not just the tourism side, it's also the evacuation side. If Lord forbid, Wit mentioned hurricanes earlier, that's a critical part of getting people off the coast as quickly as getting them there. And so it's a two-part, it's a solution that will solve two problems.
How do you engage the debate around transportation? How do you play a role into that?
Well, I think we play that by talking about the importance of tourism, and without proper transportation, the tourism can't happen. It's important for us, and we see it, and it's not always visible because what we're known for is its natural scenic beauty. People are having a great time, but it's beautiful when you're driving at 65 miles an hour. It's maybe not so beautiful when you're backed up and stopped, and so I think that's the way it comes out. And we've met with our Department of Transportation. I think they do a fantastic job, and I think they understand. They actually asked me to come speak to them just a month ago about tourism's impact on transportation. So.
And what is that? What would you articulate? So Wit, does it have and this is not going to sound right, I think you understand this, but does tourism have a meaningful argument for DOT and for funding DOT in the minds of legislators?
I would hope so. I think so, because, you know, we're a drive market. We have great airports, but people are coming here, they're driving, and they can't go out and spend if they can't get to the things they need to get to. And, you know, what we point out is how much of the percentage of people who come here drive, and how far they go while they're here. They're not just stopping in one spot and not going anywhere, and they need to have the ability to do that, to get out and spread money throughout the economy.
Yeah, one thing I'll add to that too is visitors come in, you know, they drive on a daily basis in our states more than the average local person does. Therefore, they're buying more gas, and therefore they're paying more gas tax. So they're a big contributor to the state funding mechanism, whatever that may be. But visitors certainly pay their fair share. And so that's sometimes it's easy, they talk about tolls, or they talk about increasing the gas tax, and you'll hear the term visitors pay a third of it. That's probably true. We don't have any scientific data to prove that, but it's probably about that amount. But they certainly will pay their fair share to help fund those things, be it gas tax, be it toll, or whatever the fees are.
Yeah, you said something, Duane, that was compelling, both on and off camera. You're talking about this whole idea of folks will go out of their way into an undiscovered South Carolina if they're compelled, or if you draw them into that. One of the successes Palmetto State has was this whole idea about the barbecue trail. Food seems to be a huge motivator for now vacations or getaways, to use your term, Wit. Yeah. Am I wrong about that, or has food become almost a destination driver in itself?
It has. Food has become, I think 25 years ago, food wasn't in the top 10. Today it's in the top 3 while people travel. They pick a destination, and I'll use Charleston, probably one of the great food destinations in the Southeast. Charleston has many James Beard Award-winning chefs, great restaurants. It has become one of the top 3 reasons now people go to Charleston. The barbecue trail, it was a way to get people into undiscovered South Carolina. People are passionate about barbecue, passionate about what sauce is their favorite. And so we found that food now is a passion for that. Farm to table, people want to hear about sustainability. What does that mean? How did you get the food there? You walk into a restaurant and you see a chalkboard with everything the restaurant got in that morning in a paper menu that's created from that chalkboard. True farm to table now is a concept that people are learning what that's about. Regardless of whether you're from a large city or from the rural areas, I think that's an important part of what you do. Face it, you have to eat every day, so it's going to be part of your vacation regardless, unlike, you know, something else they may choose to do or not to do. So that's become a primary reason people travel now.
Particularly we talk about the millennials, you know, and millennials, as much as our generation loves food, you know, the millennials are just obsessed with it. And so, you know, they are traveling for food in a lot of cases. So you have to make that story that you have the food, and it needs to be unique and authentic. That's what they're looking for, food that talks to a region. But if you want to see what food can do to a place, just look at Kinston, North Carolina, and what the chef and the farmer's done to help that town. And beer as well. You know, we talk about food, but drinking as well, too. You know, craft beer can make a huge difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was just going to ask you, how does North Carolina compete with Charleston? When we talk about food and a destination, how does North Carolina stack up?
We try and convince people that Charleston's part of North Carolina. It's actually,
it's all the
Carolina. You can't compete with Charleston, but you know, we have great destination as well. We just finished our beer month, April's beer month in North Carolina, so you know, we have more craft breweries than any other state in the South. And so we celebrate those things and try and combine them all together.
How do the millennials play into all this? You know, you both have referred it. You know, this is the single largest demographic since the baby boomers. It's kind of like the antelope going through the python here to some degree. So how do you read what millennials are, who they are, what they want, and how do you play to it?
Well, I think we've done that in our focus groups, see what the millennials are interested in, why they're traveling, what they want to see. You know, they're having children later than their previous generations, and so therefore they're more of a couple. A lot of times they don't have the children yet. They're having them more in their 30s and their 20s. So we're trying to engage them in those things that they can do and they like. Wit mentioned unique and authentic. Those are big things. I mentioned outdoor adventure. Those are big things. Golf a little more difficult, takes a long time, and can be a little more expensive. Now, golf has made a little bit of a comeback, but I think that some of the boomers have picked back up golf from the recession, if you will. But the millennials are looking for that unique experience. They want to hear about sustainability, want to be involved, want to be a part of it. They're looking at buildings that are LEED certified, those kinds of things. A different mindset, quite frankly, from the boomer generation is certainly different from the greatest generation.
And they're evolving. You know, I think technology today makes what millennials are like now, they may not be like in 3 more years or 4 more years. You know, we'd go 20 years and say everybody was basically the same that grew up within that 20 years. I think the millennials are going to change all that because they're evolving.
What do you think how are they going to be different?
Well, I think, you know, what they want now, they may not want that 3 years from now. They may want something different. They may have different tools to go about getting it, to finding out about it. And it didn't used to happen that way. You know, we knew what a boomer was. You know what a boomer is. You know what a Gen Xer is, pretty much. Millennials, we know what they are right now. I'm not so sure they're going to be.
Is that hard to market to when it's a moving target like that?
Definitely, definitely a challenge. Yeah.
How are so you've got food, you've got beer, you've got millennials. Do millennials are they hard? I mean, are they hard to figure out? I mean, and let me back up. Let me say it this way. So many people talk about millennials like it's a sacramental demographic, and what they are is going to define who we are forever. And you know, and I don't want to discount it because it's a big demographic.
Sure.
But how is it different from the Gen X, the baby boomers? How much different is it really?
I think it's different. Whit mentioned technology. If you look at just even in the last 5 years, the social media changes. It's about, we've gone from, it was text, and now it's gone to pictures. Now it's gone to video. I mean, you look at YouTube and its growth. YouTube has become a premium channel. You have YouTube coming out with TV series now. And so look at the advertising channels that we have now that are available to us. That's great. The bad news is you have to pick the right ones to find the right target segment that you're trying to attract. It's more difficult, as Whit mentioned, from a marketing perspective to target that market, but there are more mediums that you can reach them as well. There's a two-sided coin. But in terms of how they do things, it's technology. They look at the weather on Thursday night and decide what they're going to do in the weekend. My parents booked our weekend trip a month out.
Yeah.
That's just,
if not longer.
If not longer.
Sure.
And I did too. And so that's just, it's changed in the timing of the way they do things, how they do it, and what they're looking for when they travel have all changed. And Whit is right. It might be different in another 5 years. The cycle of how quick things change is quicker.
So how do you decide? Go ahead, Whit.
It's tough. You know, we have millennials in our office. I don't understand them. You know,
do they understand them?
I don't know that they understand them. Yeah, you know, they're wearing funky socks, and you know, you go to a meeting and they're staring at their phones all day. And I'm like, "Are you paying attention?" They're like, "Yeah, that's how I pay attention." I'm like, I don't know how we did that, but it's a challenge for us as marketers to deal with them, and they'll tell you that themselves. They're a challenge to be marketed to, based on the technology and all that. I think some of the things we're looking at is trying to focus less on demographics and more on psychographics. You know, it's not so important to us that the person's a millennial or they're Gen Xer. If they're coming here for natural scenic beauty, we want to market natural scenic beauty to somebody that's interested in that. And a millennial may be interested in it. They may, you know, maybe a woman who's just become a mother, but she wants to do a girlfriend's trip getaway, but she's also an outdoor adventurist. So, you know, we're going to have to, I think, stop talking to demographics and start talking to what people want to see.
Yeah, and just to add one thing to that, we recently came out with, he talked about craft breweries. We did a Satisfy Your Thirst Trail, and it's basically beer, wine, distilleries, and then non-alcoholic. And it's an web-based app that will allow you to. There are about 90 curated places you can go there. One of the first comments back from the millennials when we came out with it was, "I want to check it off. I want to say I've been there." We just gone back and recently added that feature to it to be able to, so you can go back and look at, say, all the distilleries, if you will. I've been there. But that's the millennials' difference between that and the other generation.
They want to brag on social.
They want to brag if they've been there.
With Beer Month, we did a tapped thing where you could earn these, you know, things, and I thought, well, who's going to do that? Well, everybody wanted to do that. You know, yeah.
I bet that Cheerwine tour wasn't quite as exciting as maybe the beer tours up in Asheville. You know, we've got about a minute left. Has it changed the way dramatically, in really 30 seconds, Whit, has it changed the way you deploy capital in advertising? Is it all internet-based now?
No, not yet. You know, we're still really high in the funnel, so we want to inspire people to start thinking about North Carolina at the beginning of their travel planning. So it's not all digital, but yes, I do think it changes the way we employ capital, and we'll keep re-evolving it as it goes.
Yeah. Well, guys, go ahead, Duane.
No, same thing for us. First thing you see on our website when you pull it up is gather inspiration. It's all about inspiration at the beginning of the chain.
Would you expect, just up or down, at the end of this year, will you expect to have positive surprise numbers or about what you expect?
I'd say about what I expect.
Yeah, okay. But
yeah.
You know you didn't answer the question. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on the program. Thank you for joining us. Of course, if you have questions or comments, go to carolinabusinessreview.com. Thank you. Good night. Or dot.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.